Good morning, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Orion Rummler, our LGBTQ plus reporter based in DC, and just so glad for this conversation. So why are we here? To talk about this research, but we're also here on this day because it's been a decade to the day since the Supreme Court decision of Obergefell v. Hodges. And this is a decision that legalized same-sex marriage. And this moment marked a significant change in public opinion on LGBTQ rights. And it also gave more to us in the right to marry. It gave us the right to plan our futures. When we think about building a home, being there for a partner in medical crisis, planning for retirement, this case made an impact and it fundamentally changed what it means to be LGBTQ plus in America. So I'm excited to dig into what the family life looks like for queer couples, married couples as well, 10 years after the fact. So let's dive into some of this brand new research from the Pew Research Center on the lived experiences of queer Americans right now. And I'm thrilled to be here with Rachel Minkin, a research associate, yes, the research associate at Pew Research and the lead researcher on this study and a project, really, a bunch of studies that Pew just put out. Thank you, Rachel.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes, I think the mics take a second. So just dive right into it. So you just released a report. It takes stock of married life for queer people across the country. It includes data on income, on education level, who's taking care of the kids, and raising children. Can you tell us why this data is important, and what does it tell us about how LGBTQ plus life has changed in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think we'll start exactly where you did too, that it's the anniversary today of Obergefell. And so we're here at 10 years of marriage equality. And that gave us an opportunity to explore the experiences, identities, lives of LGBTQ Americans. Our mission here at Pew Research Center is to hear from all groups, identities, and viewpoints, and to share that information. So my team in particular here, the social trends team, we study family life. And the Obergefell decision was a major change in U.S. family law. So we gathered this year rich data from a new nationally representative survey of almost 4,000 LGBTQ adults and did 30 in-depth interviews with same-sex parents so that we could explore all the different ways that they're experiencing American life, how they think about their identities, what it's like in families with children and between couples. And we're building on research we've done since 2013, where we did another major survey to kind of see what's changing. With this survey, it's exciting because we're able to present data on LGBTQ Americans generally, but also really dig into differences we see between those who are gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and present each of those unique experiences and viewpoints. And a lot has changed in 10 years. 2/3 of LGBTQ adults say the Obergefell decision made people more accepting of same-sex couples, and majorities of LGBTQ adults say there's more acceptance today compared with 10 years ago. But we also see that there are differences when asked, how much acceptance is there for people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and non-binary today. There's really major differences in the views of how that impacts each group. Much higher shares say there's acceptance for people who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual than transgender or non-binary.
Absolutely. And in this research, you also conducted some in-depth interviews with some of these parents, these queer parents, people raising children with their partner. What stood out to you during these conversations, which included, family life and costs of parenthood to neighborhood acceptance?
Yeah, one thread that really stood out to me, it was clear in our interviews with same-sex parents, and I could see it throughout the data, was this real desire to be seen just like families like anybody else. This wanted to be the same as everybody else. And then also on the other side of it, there were some unique experiences, challenges of these families and LGBTQ Americans. So on one hand, this is a story of American families. Some of our interview participants really described their families just like anybody else. They said they're a traditional family, and they have common worries like paying the bills, who's going to cook dinner, do homework with the kids. But there are a lot of ways that LGBTQ families stand out too. Certainly with our same-sex parents, some of the things they mentioned were difficult or expensive paths to parenthood, and some mentioned navigating a world that might not understand their family type or that they were a family, and heard stories about misconceptions they faced, navigating things in their local neighborhood, trying to understand if they're finding the right doctor who would understand their family and be able to treat them the way that we want to be treated as a family. There's also the legal considerations that they have as they kind of navigate the systems and the political climate for getting their families recognized and their rights to their children secured. So also demographically, when we look at government data, we see that same-sex couples stand out in certain ways. They're same-sex parents, it's a very small portion of the population, less than 1%. So they're less likely than different-sex couples to have kids. Other demographic details, they tend to live in certain areas. They have their high proportion living in the West and Northeast. They stand out in certain ways with their education backgrounds, with couples in a same-sex marriage more likely to both have bachelor's degrees. And here, too, we can break it down and look even at gender differences, that men in same-sex marriages stand out in certain ways for both working and higher incomes. So really looking at even the diversity within these groups and how they can stand out in the differences. But among LGBTQ adults generally, what's so important is to kind of explore those different experiences. And through our survey, we can see, as I mentioned, the different levels of social acceptance for each group, each identity, that gay, lesbian, bisexual adults, they see much more acceptance for those groups than transgender or non-binary adults. And we see that same pattern when we asked about personal acceptance, how their parents, siblings, extended family have been accepting of them. So similar, different degrees of acceptance. And we asked about experiences with discrimination, which we see big differences between groups there, that gay, lesbian, and transgender adults, majority say they've experienced being the target of slurs and jokes. Transgender adults here, too, to really pull out and understand their unique experiences where they're much more likely to have feared for their personal safety and to have experienced discrimination from healthcare settings. So really looking deep into those unique experiences, as well as understanding how they kind of fit in as it is an American story.
I love hearing about all of this data and what it means. And I was actually curious about something you mentioned, that y'all found that same-sex married couples have higher education levels than straight couples. You mentioned bachelor degrees specifically. You also found that married queer couples, especially men, have higher household incomes than straight couples. What do you think this tells us about queer families' spending power or even their political power?
Yeah, so that study as well, we found, looking at the data, that there's a rising share of households in the U.S. that are headed by same-sex couples. So really, to understand this group as a growing portion of households in the U.S., it's still very small, but yeah, that says something about their place in the American fabric, right? We also see, too, thinking about political power, with the experience of parenthood in our in-depth interviews, we heard from many parents becoming a parent really inspired in them something to be aware of their rights to their children, to be aware of the political climate. And we heard stories of, wanting to make sure they pursued all legal paths in order to ensure that they had all their rights to their marriages and their children, and to ensure that that was safe. Some said after becoming a parent, they got more active in advocating for families like theirs. So we see that from the family perspective as well, kind of interest and the importance of advocating for their families. In our survey of LGBTQ adults, we also asked about a series of questions about Pride Month to understand how they think about the motivations of companies that promote Pride. And we find that broadly, LGBTQ adults are skeptical of the motivations of companies that promote Pride Month, and they much higher shares say that these companies promote Pride, all or most of these companies promote Pride out of a business interest. Much higher shares than say it's out of a genuine desire to celebrate LGBTQ adults and people. So, I think thinking about that that might inform some of that power that they have in thinking about companies and the way that they're protected in American life.
Thank you so much. And your research also found that LGBTQ people see the past decade as quite progressive in just terms of progress made, that they expect more acceptance in the future. I was curious, did this surprise you, like this optimism for the future, considering the extent to which LGBTQ life has become a political target in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, so I think that, yes, majorities say there's more acceptance now compared with 10 years ago, and that's even for the relatively small share saying there's a fair amount or great deal of acceptance for people who are trans and non-binary, so recognizing that there's been a move for more acceptance, and majority saying they expect there to be more acceptance in the future. So I think that it takes into account today these varying levels of acceptance, depending on the group among LGBTQ Americans, but also seeing some progress in the last 10 years and some expectation for the future.
Absolutely. And I wish we could talk more, but we could just keep going forever about this data. There are copies of the report around for folks who want to spend more time with the survey results. It's online as well. And there's a breakout with just the interviews of those. I love the breakout of just the interviews with these parents and their personal journeys.
Lots of quotes, lots of personal stories that we were able to capture. Yeah.
Yes, please check it out. Just thank you so much for being here, Rachel.
Thank you.
So now we're going to get into an even deeper conversation about the experiences of LGBTQ people and their families. We've got some great panelists here, and for this conversation, we're joined by Jaimie Kelton. She's award winner a host of the award-winning Queer Family podcast and a queer mom herself. Thank you, Jaimie. Thank you. We've also got Luce Remy, Vice President of Public Policy at Family Equality. Thank you, Luce. Then we have José Rolón, content creator, LGBTQ+ Latinx advocate, and gay dad of 3. Thanks for having us. Thank you. Thanks so much, y'all, for joining us. Excited to share more about y'all's experiences and just talk about queer family life. So, when it comes to married life, Pew found that, not surprisingly, the same issues come up for queer couples and straight couples, as in home life. Not everyone's satisfied with how chores are divided, how they communicate with their partner, how they balance work and personal time. So, Jaimie, you spend a lot of time with LGBTQ+ parents on your podcast. What lessons have you learned from these conversations about how queer people can intentionally navigate these messy or difficult parts of family life?
Thanks for the question. So are you asking mainly about the division of household labor, or are you just talking about family life in general?
Any of the the messy things that come up for family life and queer people especially having to navigate maybe family planning in different ways or division of labor. Are there any conversations you've had on your podcast about how queer parents or queer families are approaching these issues in a unique way?
Yeah, well, I would say across the board, in the 300 interviews I've done of queer families, across the board, queer parents, queer families are the most intentional families families out there. We have to put so much work, into creating our families, and then we have to put so much work into how we show up in the world and how our children's experiences are of showing up in the world. And then when it comes to household labor, you know, we don't fit the box. We don't fit the normal box. So in many instances, we all have such a different approach to how household labor gets split up. We don't fall into the heteronormative roles. So we are intentional with how we split up the household chores, even in that instance. And there's, you know, we all are constantly talking with our spouses. Okay, well, you know, you do better dishes, so you should do the dishes, right? Exactly. My wife is really good at folding laundry, so that's her job, you know. But you work together to do the chores, and it's not that heteronormative role. So intentionality, like across the board, every single person I've talked to.
Thank you so much. And folks should check out the Queer Family podcast for more of these great conversations. And Jose, you know, with your beautiful family, I saw you recently shared online the story of you and your partner surrogate, Natasha, and she went the extra mile to support y'all after the birth of your children. I'm curious, are there a couple things that you wish you'd known about surrogacy before you started the journey, or some of your favorite moments along the way of building your family?
That's a great question. My surrogate, her name was Natasha, is Natasha. She's still around. She was fantastic. She gave birth to all three of my children, which is insane. She had two before mine of hers, and then she had like 6 in 7 years. And by the time she had her 7th, it was like 20, like she was only 28. It's insane. Anyway, yeah, the way that she went above and beyond was she ended up giving us, it wasn't contractual or anything like that, but it was, she gave us breast milk for 6 months for each of my kids, like from Valdosta, Georgia. So, I mean, that to me was just really amazing. So I was giving her kudos on social media about doing that and how beautiful that was. I think with surrogacy, I think it's just for us to be clear, making sure you have the right legal representation and you are crossing those T's and dotting those I's. You know, we made the mistake of, in surrogacy, you're supposed to make sure you have a will in place. And when we were pregnant with our twin girls, our son was 8 months old, so somehow we got away with not doing a will. Not on purpose, we just spaced. And we ended up doing the will, but unfortunately, when my son was 8 months old and we were 11 weeks pregnant with the twin girls, he passed away. And so that not only left a week for me to decide to follow through the pregnancy, but, you know, it also just, the grieving and all of that just made it really challenging. So what ended up happening, because we didn't have a will, it made me the executor of the administrator and not the executive. And we just closed, Tim passed away in 2013. We just closed the estate 2 weeks ago. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to just close the estate. So that was in terms of surrogacy. It's like we often rely on our lawyers, we often rely on our accountants, and that's great, but we should also be careful to educate ourselves too, because, you know, we didn't have our agency be on top of us to get those wills done. We should have known better.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jose. I feel like, well, that's what you do on your platform, just sharing your family with the world. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I was also curious, Luz, curious if you could share some of the resources that you are aware of for families who are on this family building journey, especially when they're facing insurance denying them IVF coverage, when they're facing these legal fees, as I was talking about, like dealing with lawyers trying to protect their family's future. Can you share some resources with us?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So as a lawyer, listening to Jose's story, and I know Jose, and he's such a lovely, his family is amazing. When you were telling this, I was like, oh my God, yes, that is the thing that your family attorney should have told you. But when we talk about intentionality, there's so much information that as queer individuals looking to start and maintain and have your family thrive that you don't know that you don't know. And then there is, I think, you get overwhelmed by the paperwork, the health insurance the claims forms, and we don't start thinking about what the architecture of our child and our family's life is going to look like. So as you are going through the process of thinking about whether you're going to do adoption, foster care, whether you're going to do surrogacy, whether you're going to go through use assisted reproductive technology, you should also at the same time be thinking about what is that life going to look like, which means a good way to test for things is to see what questions an agency, a doctor, a lawyer ask you. And if they aren't asking you so many things that you feel overwhelmed, they are probably not the right people to go with, because creating a family is so big. At Family Equality, and we are one of the oldest LGBTQ plus organizations in the country, we were founded to help as a support group for queer adults who were losing access to their children when they came out in the 70s. So we've been really focused around understanding and knowing your rights, and also understanding the journey to create a family. So we have resources on the cost of surrogacy, understanding state-by-state guide on what foster care looks like. We also have great resources on looking at your parentage rights state by state. So one of the things, particularly in this environment right now where things feel very fraught and we're feeling like they're coming after our trans siblings and they're coming after queer families, is to say, I love Obergefell. It was decided the day after my birthday, so it's one of the, I always celebrate it, but I always say the best way for you to build a family is to assume you don't have rights. Treat this process as if I have no rights, how do I create them? So everything from living wills, powers of attorney, making sure you annually look at your insurance documents. Life changes, making sure that your children are added in as beneficiaries. Just assume you have nothing, but you have all these assets and you have a thing you want to protect, and go line by line protecting it. And if you do it on a somewhat regular basis, it becomes a muscle. And then you, in knowing that, will then talk about it to your friends in the carpool line as you're like, oh yeah, I have to go look at our insurance policy again. They're like, you look at it? You're like, yeah, I look at it every year. That helps someone else. And I recommend going to Family Equality's website. We have lots of information on the whole sort of life cycle of creating and maintaining your family.
Thank you so much, Liz. It can be just kind of a maze for families navigating this, so I appreciate these resources. And, something else I'd love to talk about is, many LGBTQ parents just don't feel safe in this country. Pew Research data is so important. And then a recent survey as well by Diva Charitable Trust and the Kerr Foundation, they found that a third of the LGBTQ parents they spoke to don't feel like they have the same legal rights as other families. But 63% of those parents who don't feel like that they have the same rights, they are legally married. So they have the benefits of a legal union, but it's not helping. They just feel like we don't have the same rights. Jose and Jaimie, from your conversations with all the parents you speak to, do you have thoughts about why these parents may feel this way?
Well, it's really interesting because I felt like, 10 years ago, I think before, we would see a lot of microaggression towards the LGBTQ community and family in particular, but we've now moved into macroaggression with legislation, and that is what's scary for everybody. That's the difference. It's always the neighbor said something about my kid can't play with this kid now because they can't associate themselves with a gay dad or whatever. Actually, that's not not micro, that's aggressive. But but yeah, now it's just in your face, and it's scary, and I have to say, you know, I feel, and I imagine some of us in the audience feel very fortunate. At least I feel very blessed to live in Brooklyn Heights. It's very inclusive. It's amazing for my kids. But, you know, I always say this to people, between New York, LA, and Miami, there's thousands and thousands of LGBTQ families that do not have the resources and the means, and it's got to be really scary for them, because for us, if we're on edge, I can't even imagine what that is like for, you know, all of those families. And, you know, this is why I actually talk about allies, for the allies in the room. I think it's so important that, you know, everybody gets out there and speaks on our behalf, because, you know, if I were to get called to speak on stage in Wichita, right, as a gay Latin dad, chances are they're probably not going to receive the information on LGBTQ plus issues. They're not going to receive the information the same way as a straight white ally, because they're like, oh, well, that person is like me, and they're understanding more. You know, I don't know. I just really wanted to. I don't think we give enough credit to allies, and I don't think we try to push them and encourage them to speak for us, because they really have helped push us forward.
Yeah, I would say we need more upstanders, less bystanders in our world. But also, to your point about, I live in New York City too, and the rhetoric that is being spewed and spreading like wildfire throughout the country and the world is very scary. And I would add that it's actually even made it, my kids go to school in Chelsea, which is the, you know, modern day LGBTQ civil rights movement heart. And the rhetoric has been brought to our school. And there's this whole argument happening on our school board about trans girls in sports. And it's very scary to know that there are parents in my kids' school who agree with the other side. And that really, really scares me. And also, our school puts up a pride flag outside for June every year, and it was recently torn down one night. We don't know who did it. So, and you hope that it was somebody who just wanted the flag for themselves. Like, that's what I'm hoping. But, you know, you can't help but wonder if it was some angry parent at our school who doesn't agree with pride. So all the hateful rhetoric that's been spreading just puts this little seed in all of our brains. Like, what if New York is not safe anymore? Like, how far is this going to go? I can't believe it came to Chelsea. So I think that, you know, that's my answer. It's just getting to be a scarier and scarier time for all of us.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share, last January, I had this, it's become public, but I had this far-right conspiracist named Stu Peters, who went to millions of his followers, and he does these 52-minute segments, news segments, and he doesn't believe the Holocaust happened. I mean, he's very far-right. And out of those 52 minutes, he spent 20 minutes on my family, and not an opinion, but factually said I was molesting my children, and even used clips from brands that we did we did a brand with a closet company, and he used that clip as like, look, he's bringing his daughter into the closet to show him his sex toys. And so, you know, this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with right now, which we would not have dealt with before. Good news, we had a good court date a month ago, and it looks like we might might win this defamation case. It's a while a ways, but just speaking about that macro aggression, this is the world that we're living in. Even myself, who felt very safe in Brooklyn Heights, when I started getting a bunch of death threats, and my kids were just at that age where they were walking to school on their own, they were super excited, I had to put a cap to that. I had to start picking them up because I got nervous. Some of the death threats were coming from Staten Island area code. So, that's it, even in New York City, in the safest place.
Yeah, I hate to keep adding to this. I'm sorry. I'm sure you want to move on, but it feels like people are saying the silent parts out loud on purpose now, like more and more, and on a much smaller level. I got on my social media, somebody stitched one of my videos, so they did a response and they said all kinds of crazy stuff about me, and this person had a huge following, and now they won't leave me. I've had to turn comments off on some of my posts, and then they'll go to other posts that don't even pertain to what they're saying and comment there. So and this is within the last year that it's really ramping up. So, and I don't have as big a platform as you do. So it's really scary.
I also wanted to jump in here from a policy perspective, because all of what you're saying is super true. And I think the thing that we also need to understand is that New York is New York, DC is DC, LA, the gay meccas. But I'm trying to remember what organization found this, but a large majority of LGBTQ plus families and households are actually happening in the South. They are happening in the Midwest, and oftentimes these are families of color. So as they are, based on that information we got out of Pew, I would say one of the reasons why I think these families are feeling like while marriage is there, they're not being recognized, they don't have as much rights, is because the states in which they are in are enacting, they're saying the quiet part out loud, and they are enacting policies as much as they can to make these families, to make these individuals feel othered to the point where they don't allow themselves into public life. And frankly, I think as parents or people who are members of our chosen communities and families, we protect them. And when you hear something is potentially negative, you stop allowing your child to walk to school by themselves because you are protective. And in some ways, the policies that are coming forward are relying on that reaction. They're relying on us withdrawing in order to be safe, because our family and children are they're so vulnerable. So that intentionality is, I think, something also we have to acknowledge.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this conversation, especially you brought up schools, because that was something else the Career Foundation found is a good number of LGBTQ parents they made sure to not be out at all to anyone at their kids' schools, which to y'all's point about the pride flag being taken down and being worried about the school and then being targeted by far-right or alt-right figures, that I would assume that's part of why parents are feeling that way. And then also when it comes to school, especially in the South, parents of trans youth are navigating a minefield right now. 19 states ban trans students from using bathrooms that match their gender identity. 28 states ban trans kids from joining school sports that align with their gender. Luce, I wanted to go back to you about, are there specific resources you can recommend for parents navigating these bans or for understanding state education policies in general?
Yes. So to understand the landscape, I'm going to start with this. Is in 2023, Family Equality as well as GLSEN did a survey of LGBTQ plus parents and children, and we're looking at the particular experiences of children with LGBTQ with queer caregivers, their experiences in K through 12 school. And what we found was that they were experiencing increased bullying, harassment, othering, and situations that really you wouldn't want for any child. And so we did that study just to be able to talk about it, because I think there is a focus on, as it rightly should be, on the queer and LGBTQ plus youth in school, but not recognizing that children with LGBTQ plus caregivers also find themselves either alienated or bullied in similar ways and in similar levels. So we have not won that survey. So I would say to parents to go read it, take it to your teacher, your principal, just so that they can understand that this these policies have an impact. Also, with the somewhat abortive updates to Title IX, we have also resources on our website talking about what is Title IX, how do you use it, when to file a complaint, what should the DOJ do, how do you get in touch with the FBI about something. We have also, it's been updated to reflect the current administration and what we're seeing going on and different resources. We're also talking and we're building out additional resources to talk about different Title VII, Title III, like, you know, how these things also impact parents and how to use them. Because there are, one of the good things about the administrative state in the United States is that it has a panoply of protections and expectations that all citizens will be treated equally. And that includes us, and that includes our children. So there are so many different things that you might find at the Department of Agriculture that will still cover your child's right in school because the school takes a voucher program or does school meals. So there are multiple different ways where you can ask and require your school and your municipality to really be responsive to you.
Thank you so much. And to go back to the topic of marriage equality, you know, we've seen widespread public support for marriage equality grow pretty much each year. But according to Gallup, Republican support most recently has reached its lowest point since 2016, which was the year after Obergefell was decided. I think we've already been addressing this, but I'm just, you know, question for anyone or everyone who wants to take it. You know, why do you think this is happening? Like, what do you think's happening here?
I mean, you know, I remember when Obergefell happened, I thought we made it. Like, I'm like, oh, this is it. We're good now. Looking back, you realize that wasn't the finish line. That was the starting line, right? That was the beginning of what needs to get done. And because things can go backwards, as we've seen. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, being given permission to share things out loud, and you know, it infects, right? It's works like a disease. It just seeps into everybody's home. You know, I travel to speak around the country, and you know, in my hotel rooms, we know, like, the news is so different, like so different. I'm like, this would never be in New York. Just like I'm sure when they come to New York, they would, right? So, you know, I think that the media is just feeding so much. You know, it's a 24-hour cycle, right? It's no longer growing up like the 8 o'clock news or 10 o'clock news, whatever it was. But I think that's the big problem. So I think, you know, it's really important to, you know, chosen family is like our superpower, right? Like, it's so important to have them close to us, and then community and you know, organizations. I wish, I've made so many mistakes in the last 10 years financially, and like, I wish I had family equality. I mean, it would have made a world of difference. And so just, you know, having those resources and the know-how is what's going to have us be able to get to the other side and be the victor.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fear-mongering and smoke and mirrors what's happening right now, and it spreads. It's insane. And I think also on top of having the resources, it's also all of us sharing our stories and showing up, and just to show the world, no, this is us. We're not the monsters they're making us out to be. You know, the more we show up, especially those of us who can show up without getting harmed, I find it to be my mission to show up, to help those who really do have to hide, especially right now. And so sharing our stories, I think, is just one of the most important, lovely things to do. And just to add a personal anecdote, when my daughter was born, we had just been married the year before and legally married. When my daughter was born, the nurses said, oh, it said mother and father on the form. Oh, it's fine. Just cross out father and write mother. Birth certificate comes in the mail, and it said my wife was listed as mother and I was listed as father. So we called whoever it was we were supposed to call. And this is right after we were legally allowed to be married. The woman on the phone said, well, are you married? And I said, yes, actually, we are. And she said, well, do you have a marriage certificate? I said, yes. And she said, well, you need to send it to me. I mean, that is not true. Every person who goes in to have a baby is not married to the person, and they both get put on the birth certificate. But we did it, and we could, and we had the certificate to do it. However, my point with this is just the fact that we were legally allowed to do it did not change that woman's heart and mind over if we should or not, right? And I feel like to your point, Jose, we're on an uphill climb here, and we haven't reached the top. We're just climbing, and that's how it feels. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. You said that, and I was like, oh my God, yes, this is why I still have a job. Because part of our work and our policy department, I've got an amazing policy team. I love heading it, and I spend every day just spending time with brilliant people. But part of what we do is going state by state and talking to legislators to make them update their family codes such that, birth certificate forms just have parents, so that the rights we got with Obergefell trickled down into our everyday lives. Just because we had Obergefell did not mean that the regulations had changed. And so we go in to make sure that it is as simple and painless for queer LGBTQ plus individuals, families, to live their lives as possible. And to your point about Republicans and what they're saying, I think the thing is, we have to understand that the average individual family member is just trying to make it through their day. And it really is about who a political party and organization puts out in front of the public. We tend to give a lot of power and authority to people who speak, so politicians, members of our community. And if we're putting out people who are willing to say these things, the average American is just living their life. And if they hear it on auto repeat because they've got the 24-hour news cycle, they've got social media, they're too busy. So they're going to assume that they're going to start repeating the things. And maybe if these people link it to things that are happening in their lives, they start believing them. So it's not that I think it's a benign thing. I don't think I think it's horrible. But I think it's also that the reality is we're all trying really hard to make it. And unless we have the visible stories of LGBTQ+ individuals and families in front of us, where it's our uncle, it's our aunt, it's our teacher, it's our bus driver, we just take that in and it becomes fact.
I really appreciate y'all's conversation on this, and Jaimie, thank you for sharing that personal example of how frustrating it was. No, this is all right, but it didn't matter to that person in the moment. Luce, I did want to go back to you because this year, lawmakers in at least 9 states have tried to chip away at marriage equality, and that includes bills asking the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell, which I don't think is how that works. But Luce, has family equality been tracking this issue? And what are, if you know what advocates are doing on the ground to oppose these bills, and what do you think this signals about the current state of LGBTQ rights?
So yes, we are tracking it. Family equality, one of the things we're deeply proud of is that we were one of the main force behind the Voices brief that was submitted with parents and children talking about the impact of their families being able to get married. And we're deeply proud of the fact that it got quoted in the majority opinion. But what that has meant is that we are we are invested when it comes to marriage. And so we look at everything from resolutions like that to whether anything related to marriage we're tracking. And other members of movement organizations are, like ACLU, Single A GLAD, Law, Lambda Legal, so there is an ecosystem of organizations and individuals that are tracking this. Now, those bills scared me. Those resolutions scared me because it was so, not because of what they said, and you're right, it doesn't work that way, but because it was so blatant, and it was a sort of organized and concerted effort. But they died in every single state where they were put forward. They may have moved through some may have moved through one house, but they died. And that is because we're winning. We are Americans. Our families look just like any other American family, and they're only putting this out there because they are scared of the fact that we're going to win. But that doesn't mean we don't fight it. Within the movement, we are aware of those bills. We track them. A lot of things have to happen quietly because the reality is often when queer and BIPOC organizations come forward, it's perceived to be othering or making something sensational. So we just try to let the legislative process work and, influence where we can, but we are very actively involved and very concerned. And I think you asked me something else that I didn't answer.
I think you answered all of it. I really appreciate your thoughts about this and the work y'all have been doing since the beginning, like you mentioned in the original opinion. And then, Jaimie, I wanted to go back to you to talk about some of the conversations you've had on your podcast with non-binary and transgender parents, which I love hearing these stories because these are people who face extra hurdles to parenthood and family planning. And, like in March, you spoke with Jacob and Riley, a trans couple, about their family building journey. Just as an example, you've had other conversations like that. But, what are you learning from these folks about what queer family means, what from their experiences?
Thanks for that question. It's lovely. And Jacob and Riley were they're the most amazing couple in that episode. If you want to listen to one episode, I would recommend that episode because it gives you all the good feelings. They are just so full of love and intentionality across the board, like I said before. But what I've noticed, and this is actually an umbrella thing too across the LGBTQ community, as I like to call us, because you say that so many times, you gotta sparkle it up. But I think that across the board, and especially in the trans and non-binary community, there are no guidebooks for family building. It is so hard to know if you even can. How could you go about it? And that's across the board in the LGBTQ community, but even more so in the trans community. And there's so much, and non-binary community, there's so much less information out there. And when I first started this show 7 years ago, there was so little for the entire LGBTQ community in terms of family building. There is more now, but now we need to step it up for the trans and non-binary community. There are some resources, but there are not enough. We are not in the media, so you can't go to your TV show to see how so-and-so, Jack and Riley, did it on such and such episode of whatever. We're not there. We're not in any of these shows. And so it's across the board, it's the lack of resources. And that's why podcasts like mine are important, and that's why family equality is so important. That's why your social media account is so important, because it's the representation. And the more stories that are out there, the more everyone can learn. But in a lot of instances with the trans and non-binary folks I've spoken to, they've had to get scrappy to figure out how to do what they want to do in building their families. And it's not fair. It's a huge inequity across the board. So there needs to be more resources. However, they all show up, all of us show up with so much intention. And we we are the most intentional families out there. Mark my words. So for anybody to say that LGBTQ folks should not have families, it is the most ridiculous argument anyone could ever say. All you have to do is go and listen to one of my 300 episodes to hear how intentional and how much beauty we bring to every single decision. And there are many decisions we have to make, every single decision when it comes to our families. And that's my takeaways.
And I'm going to take an opportunity to plug that Family Equality has a monthly meeting for parent support group for trans and non-binary adults. I would also plug that check out your local LGBTQ plus center. Oftentimes there are virtual or in-person sort of affinity groups, particularly for trans and non-binary, and we also have resources around the health and sort of fertility issues for trans and non-binary people.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak for the trans community, or about the trans community. One thing that, if we're keeping it real, it's like it's not just the non-LGBTQ plus folks that need to work on informing and educating, but also the LGBTQ. Like there's so much transphobia even within our community, and even I had to learn. So there's still stuff I'm still wrapping my brain around. I'm a Gen X. The same thing with the non-binary stuff, the pronouns and this and that, right? Like that. We've got to listen to the kids. We've got to pay attention. But I don't know. I just wanted to call attention to our own community that needs work to be better for the trans community, particularly Black trans.
Thank you so much, Jose. I appreciate having you all chime in this area. It's an area I'm passionate about as well. And our last December, I think, our newsroom, we published a series on pregnancy in America, and with KFF, I believe, and I wrote a story about pregnant trans men, like the journeys they're going through. So that's my plug. And so something else that Pew Research found, which I think we touched on earlier, but they found that LGBTQ couples are worried about what the future may hold for families like theirs. They're worried that federal policies may strip queer couples of legal rights to their children, especially. And Lisa, I wanted to start with you again about, can you walk us through some of the rights that queer couples currently have, at the state and federal level for things like unpaid leave from work to take care of a spouse, or, like the rights to adoption, like the different kinds of adoption?
Sure. So with the Respect for Marriage Act passing, it removed Defense of Marriage Act. So therefore, it removed federal it did the things. And that is great. So that was great, but what we're seeing is in the current big, beautiful bill, I think we really need to pay attention to the fact that while the Respect for Marriage Act sort of equalized things, when it comes to the rights and benefits that we have, and when it comes federally, it really is how we budget. So changes to SNAP, changes to family leave federally, changes to the ACA, all of those impact LGBTQ plus families. And so from the federal level, you need to care about your budget. At the state level, which reality is most of family law and most of the things you're concerned about are state-based, around 30 plus states don't really have their family leave laws don't allow for any individual to take care of a partner who they are not married to, or take care of a child that they are not legally or biologically connected to. So that means the majority of states don't have those rights. So if you are building your family, take a look at what your state's policies are. There are a couple that do have them, and part of our work is, one of the things about family equality and being focused on family is family sits at the intersection of everything in American life. I say, show me how a country treats families, I will tell you everything about that country. And so for us, we are concerned with tax credits, SNAP. We are concerned with family leave policies. We're concerned with everything related to reproductive rights. Because we have to be so intentional in creating our families, that means, and families are the center of sort of legal things, that means we touch on everything. So a lot of my day is spent learning about tax credits, looking at family leave policies, signing on in coalition at state level for updates to insurance mandates to make sure that the definition of infertility allows for, LGBTQ plus individuals or couples to be able to have that covered. So your rights are a majority state-based, and while it's not always a very affirming picture, it is getting better. And I would send you to the Movement Advancement Project. They have their website is amazing, and they have a lovely sort of tracker on this. And so if you want to know what's happening in your state, Movement Advancement Project has that information. And I tend to rely on them because they do a great amount of work, and then we build off of what they do as well.
Thank you so much. And Jaimie and Jose, I'm curious if y'all have any thoughts from the conversations you've had with queer parents in your network about the rights they're navigating. I mean, and then Jaimie shared a personal story about, having to send a marriage certificate. Any stories or, about the kind of rights that parents in your network are worried about losing, or like the challenges they're facing?
Well, I love that you brought up insurance for fertility benefits, because that's something that comes up time and time again in my conversations, because of the makeup of our relationships, most of us, there are very few who don't need help, but most of us need help to create our families. And so that means fertility care, and these insurance policies are just inherently biased against LGBTQ couples or people, right? Because many of the policies state that you have to prove that you have tried at home for 6 months before you are eligible for fertility treatments. We have been trying. It's not working. We try regularly.
Boy, have we been trying.
I always say if it was based on the quality of our trying, we would have so many babies. Like, it would be amazing. But yeah,
That was my mom's one relief when I came out. She was like, "Oh, that's not going to happen randomly."
I know, that's what I hope for with my kids. But for insurance and benefits for that are inclusive of all kinds of identities and families is one thing that comes up regularly in my conversations. So thanks for bringing that up, Luz.
My son is biologically my late husband's, which is this beautiful blessing he left behind. The girls are mine, but all three have the same egg donor. But when he passed away, they did not, because we were pregnant with the twin girls, they did not want to grant us his Social Security benefits. They would only grant it to Avery, my son, Avery, because he was alive, and we were both listed on the birth certificate for all three. But the hurdles that I had to go through, which was like, well, my husband passed away a heart attack in Pennsylvania. He was on a business trip, and so I had to prove to Social Security that he wasn't that we didn't get split up and that he was living in Pennsylvania. I had to prove, because the girls were biologically mine, they were not afforded the same Social Security benefits as my son. For a year, I sat in that Social Security office. If we've been in government offices, which I grew up in, it's like, it's horrible. I sat there for a year, and there was all the hurdles, and I fought for it. I got all three of them their Social Security benefits, which is such a gift every month to help with bills. And I am nervous.
Speaking of intentionality, right here, thank you.
You know, when you become a widower, you're in survival mode, right? I mean, or even a single mom, if you're raised by a single mom, you just get in survival mode. And I think in some way we are all right now in survival mode. So yeah, intentionality for sure. But I'm nervous that we are going to go back there because this is sort of like a state-to-state thing that happened with that. And so like that's what I don't want to happen, and that's what families are talking about. Yeah, I have a couple dads who have a trans child, and they are now next week moving to Curacao, and they live in Brooklyn. Like, it's pretty liberal as it gets, but they're moving to Curacao now because they're much more open and welcoming there, and they don't have to deal with all the stuff that we're dealing with.
I want to add to what you just said, Jose, because you made me think of something with your story with the Social Security, and I think, Luz, you said earlier, what you don't know, you don't know, and I think that like years ago, there was so much more of this, like, it's just not on people's radar to think of including us in their thoughts, right? There was more of that. And then we had gotten to a place where people were actually doing a better job of including us in their thoughts. Like, I always say that I'm like the squeaky mom at pickup who's like, oh, like I'm always bringing in the queer perspective because I'm like, you don't be so heteronormative. I'm like so annoying with my pink hair, but it felt like we were getting somewhere, and now it feels like we're going to go back to that, what you don't know, you don't know. And it's okay to be in the dark, and it's okay to not consider us and all the identities that are out there, and that's what's scary. When my wife gave birth to our daughter, my job, just what you don't know, you don't know, and they weren't realizing that I was actually becoming a parent too, and I had to go to work the day after my daughter was born because it just wasn't on their radar, and it wasn't on my radar to educate them. I was just a new parent, and I didn't know any better, so I went to work. But it's that kind of stuff that we were working towards a brighter future, and now it feels like it's might come back to the what you don't know era.
Yeah, and I would say that, like, thank you for pointing that out, and going back to work the same day, like the day after, is one of the reasons why I do what I do, is that the work for our families, for us to create them, for them to thrive, benefits everyone. When we remove the gender from a birth certificate form, that makes it so much easier for the white cis het couple who adopted their child in Panama to get their forms changed. When I reduce the amount of effort it takes for a queer family to do a step-parent adoption, that means a blended family, the Utah blended family can do the exact same thing. None of the work that we want for our families to be recognized harms anyone. It just expands and makes things easier for everyone. For people who don't want to or have never thought about us, we're thinking about you all the time. And that's the thing that I kind of want them to know, is that we're always moving in a way that's benefiting you. We're thinking about you, so we'd like you to think about us just a little bit.
I so love that you shared everything you just shared.
Same, yeah.
I can't thank you three enough for this conversation. This has been so lovely. Just Jose, Luz, and Jaimie, I hope everyone can give it up for them. Just such a great conversation. Thank you so much. Then folks can find on the Queer Family podcast, best place to find Jaimie's work, and then Luz, the Family Equality website. And then Jose, is your handle NYC Gay Dad? Yes, on Instagram, NYC Gay Dad. Just thank you all for coming around. And then at our newsroom, the 19th News, we're at 19thnews.org. Hope you'll follow our work. We have the latest stories in gender politics and policy, how women and LGBTQ people are changing America. Just thank you so much for being here.